Thank you, Ashley, and hi everyone. Bojan and Yura here, program managers on the customer experience engineering team for Microsoft Defender for Cloud. We're delighted to be joining you today to share some insights that can be of real value when thinking about how to protect your multi-cloud environments. So the topic of our presentation today is really going to be all about how you can use Microsoft Defender for Cloud's multi-cloud capability to secure your workloads in Azure, AWS, GCP, as well as on premises. So what we've thought we would do is spend just a little bit of time giving you an overview and talking about that foundational grounding around the challenges as well as the trends we're seeing in the multi-cloud space and how that's applicable to our conversation today. Then we also want to touch on the importance of taking the controls that you have and mapping them to specific regulatory compliance standards and framework, as well as for Azure, but also for AWS and GCP. Then we also want to go into some of the new capabilities which we announced last month at Ignite, namely the agentless scanning and how that's applicable for Azure and AWS workloads, as well as the cloud security graph. At the same time, we know it's important to follow up and follow through on remediating any misconfigurations, which is why we also want to provide you with an overview as well as a live demo to the security governance capability that empowers your teams to follow up and follow through on the remediation process for Azure, AWS, and GCP. Then we also want to touch on the importance of having just-in-time VM access control enabled for Azure as well as AWS workloads. And finally, we want to end on a high note with Q&A. Should you have any questions throughout our conversation today, I want to encourage you to also leverage the chat window. We have a wider team of product and program managers here to support, and also a big thank you for them for joining us today. So that's our agenda for today, and let's start. So here we just want to very, very briefly touch on the cloud security challenges that companies are facing. On this slide in particular, we see a couple of trends of just how important it is to develop and operate secure applications in the cloud. We even have here a number citing that less than 54% of enterprises do not integrate security into their CI/CD. We're also seeing more organizations embracing a multi-cloud strategy, which puts an emphasis on adhering to security best practices across different public cloud providers, as well as across specific industries, while at the same time needing then to manage the complexity of having a multi-cloud environment. What we're also seeing is that the attackers' tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs as they're commonly referred to, continue to evolve. And here we are seeing, well, a lot of trends, but two ones that are especially concerning are the increase both in the number of attacks as well as the increase in their sophistication. We even have here a number that in 2021 alone, the average cost of breaches was well over $4 million US. And unfortunately, still a significant portion of security breaches happens to poor cybersecurity hygiene. And with companies embracing multi-cloud strategies, I do want to also acknowledge that improving an organization's journey across different public cloud providers is a process. We believe Microsoft Defender for Cloud can help here, and we really see here a need by organizations to have a tool in place which can unify the DevOps security management, as well as detect misconfigurations, provide guidance on how to best remediate and harden those resources, regardless where those resources reside. So be it in Azure, CWP, AWS, or even on premises. So we believe that in addition to detecting misconfigurations and applying security best practice guidance, which is important, as well as to the DevOps security management, we also know it's important to monitor the environment for potential signs of compromise across different resource types, as well as across the different stages of how the cyber bad actors could potentially compromise your environment, which comes in the form of the cloud kill chain model. That's why Defender for Cloud has a lot of capabilities. So today we want to dive deeper into the multi-cloud capabilities that can be of real value to you when you look to protect your Azure, Amazon, Google Cloud Platform, as well as on-premises resources. Most of the Defender for Cloud capabilities all up can be divided into these three pillars or groupings of functionality you can see on the slide, many of whom I already touched upon. Just as a quick recap, with DevOps Security Management, you're able to connect your source code management repository systems to Defender for Cloud to get security best practice guidance, as well as to unify the all DevOps Security Management. Here, we want to shift further left, as it's called in the industry, by providing you with a set of capabilities that allow you to do so and to detect vulnerabilities early on, especially in code. At the same time, while you go about deploying your workloads across AWS, Azure, GCP, we also want to provide you again with that visibility into any misconfigurations, as well as security best practice guidance on how to remediate those. As well, monitoring for potential suspicious activities, signs of compromise, which is where the threat detection capabilities come into play. What we can also do is integrate with a lot of different tools, be it SIEMs, be it also workflow automation through logic apps, as well as other ITCMs, among many other systems that we can connect to help you then also address these potentially suspicious activities. On this slide, we also wanted to give you an overview of what are actually the threat detection capabilities we support as of today. And we are going to go deeper into the ones related to multi-cloud, specifically to AWS and GCP. Before I hand it off to Yura, who's going to then guide us through the different parts of our conversation today that we outlined in the agenda, I just want to very briefly, as a housekeeping note, again emphasize that in order to take advantage and use the multi-cloud capabilities that we offer, for CSPM, it's completely agentless. You are not required to deploy any agents in order to get the security recommendations, as well as some other advanced CSPM capabilities that we are going to be talking about today. Now, in addition to applying security best practice guidance, when you're detecting and monitoring the environment for potential signs of compromise, here is where you can then leverage the cloud workload protection capabilities that we offer outside of Azure, and we do have native support for AWS and GCP that you can use here, and those do rely on an agent. So with that, I'll pass the word over to Yura to walk us through the regulatory compliance. Yura, over to you.
Thank you, Bojan. Hi, everyone. This is Yura Lee here. We are talking about regulatory compliance in Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Next slide, please. Microsoft Defender for Cloud continually compares the configuration of your resources with requirements and industry standards, regulations, and benchmarks. The regulatory compliance dashboard provides insight to your compliance posture based on how you're meeting specific compliance requirements. Industry standards and regulatory standards and benchmarks are represented in Defender for Cloud's regulatory compliance dashboard. Each standard is an initiative defined in Azure policy. What we recently released with the rest of our announcements at Ignite is we use what we call a Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark, or MCSB. You might be familiar with Azure Security Benchmark. We've kind of taken the Azure Security Benchmark and improved that and extended that to be a Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark, or MCSB. And MCSB is really designed to be a comprehensive cloud agnostic set of security principles designed to recommend the most up-to-date technical guidance, not only for your Azure workloads, but also other clouds such as AWS and GCP. So we recommend to our customers to use MCSB for customers who want to maximize their security posture and align their compliance status with industry standards. Beyond MCSB, we also have AWS-specific regulatory standards like AWS PCI DSS 3.2.1, and also an example would be GCP ISO 27001. As you see in the snapshot here, we have regulatory compliance that is specific to AWS, and later on in this presentation, in this webinar, we will demo going through that pain and going through that experience with you later on. If we can move forward to agentless scanning. Thank you, Bojan. Agentless scanning is also another announcement that we've talked about, that we released during Ignite. Until now, Defender for Cloud based its posture assessments for VMs on agent-based solutions. To help customers kind of maximize coverage and reduce onboarding management and management friction, at Ignite, we've released agentless scanning for VMs to preview. By VMs, we mean right now we cover Azure VMs and also your AWS EC2 instances. With agentless scannings for VMs and EC2 instances, powered by Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management, you get a wide visibility of installed software and software CVEs without the challenges of, agent installation and maintenance, network connectivity requirements, and, maybe you're thinking about performance impact on your workloads. Agentless vulnerability scanning is available in both Defender Cloud Security Posture Management and in Defender for Service P2 with, again, native support for AWS and Azure. Next slide, please. Let's go over really quickly how it works. While agent-based methods use operating system APIs in runtime to continuously collect security-related data, agentless scanning for VMs uses cloud APIs to collect data, right? So for Defender for Cloud, what we do with agentless scanning is we take snapshots of the VM disks, and the Defender for Cloud does an out-of-band deep analysis of the OS configuration and file system stored in the snapshot. The copied snapshot does not leave the original compute region of the VM, and the VM is also never impacted by the scan. After the necessary metadata is acquired from the disk, Defender for Cloud immediately then deletes the snapshot of the disk and sends the metadata to Microsoft engines to analyze configuration gaps and maybe any potential threats that exist. The analysis is done by Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management, and the results are displayed in the Defender for Cloud dashboard, seamlessly consolidating agent-based and agentless results. Again, the scanning environment where the disks are analyzed or regional, they're isolated and highly secure. The data snapshots and the data unrelated to the scan are no longer stored longer than it is necessary to collect the metadata, and all of this usually, takes a couple of minutes. Next slide, please. We also introduced Cloud Security Graph. One of the biggest challenges that we've heard from our customers is that security teams today, they face just a number of security issues on a daily basis. They all need to be resolved, and there's never enough resources, never enough time to address them all. So we're here to help kind of prioritize the most critical risks with prioritized lateral movement paths and contextual security insights, all built on the intelligent Cloud Security Graph. So what does this mean? Contextual security is a newer concept that we are introducing that will make recommendations and mitigations more effective and focused on the potential breach paths and potential business impact, right? So to explain, the Cloud Security Graph is one pane that collects all the data about your environment. We take these integrated insights from Defender for Defender for Cloud. Maybe you've got Defender for DevOps, Defender for External Attack Surface Management. We also we take all of this data and we provide you with prioritized risk through the Cloud Security Explorer and the attack paths. The attack path analysis is a graph-based algorithm that scans the cloud security graph. The scan exposes exploitable paths that attackers may use to breach your environment and reach your high impact assets, right? So we bring together contextual information like internet exposure on a certain a resource, permissioning, lateral movement, sensitive information, and more. We expose those attack paths to your security admins, and then we suggest recommendations as to how to best remediate the issue that will hopefully break the attack path and prevent successful breach. We can provide information like identifying the most vulnerable resources, along with potential exploitable lateral movement paths, or you can view the most relevant CVE data and risk context to focus on remediation. Next, the customers can use the, sorry, if you stay on the same slide. Let's talk about the Cloud Security Explorer. The Cloud Security Explorer allows you to proactively search the cloud security graph to customize queries and find security risks in your environment based on your organization's key concerns. We've got templated queries like by specific CVE, maybe internet exposure, production and business tags, but we also provide the capability for customers to run their own searches. We can look up recommendations, vulnerabilities, insights about resources and connections between your resources, right? Again, customers can further customize and hunt for cloud risks by running graph-based queries. And this is important, and this is really, we want to highlight this because this feature is available not only for your Azure resources, but right now also for your AWS resources. Next slide, please. Bojan, back to you.
Thank you for this great overview. Before we go into the demo, where we want to give you a first-hand glimpse into how does this look like in a full-fledged live environment, we also want to touch upon other capabilities that might be of real value when you use them across multi-cloud, so across AWS, GCP, as well as Azure. One that can help is the recently announced security governance capability that we released, which empowers your security teams to follow up on how the remediation is done. In most cases, what we also heard from organizations that we work with is that security teams do need to work together with the resource owners to remediate misconfigurations, which is why security governance, one way of looking at it, it's also a built-in way where we empower you to identify workload owners who you can then go and talk to remediate misconfigurations on their workloads. So it provides you with this built-in framework and built-in capability that you can use to do this whole process in a standardized and efficient way. And we're going to show how this looks like in the demo. But before we go into the demo, we also want to acknowledge that another challenge that companies are facing is with regards to management ports. When management ports are open and publicly exposed, that obviously presents an opportunity for attackers and bad actors, as well as it increases the overall attack surface and entry points for those attackers to your environment, which is why in addition to just-in-time VM access for Azure, we also support this for AWS VMs as well, so for your EC2 instances. The idea behind using just-in-time VM access is instead of having your management ports open all of the time, you can also have them open and even a limit for just a specific time to specific IP address. And there's even a way that someone can go about then requesting just-in-time access to your Azure as well as AWS VMs. At the same time, while talking about just-in-time VM access, which is one capability, we also know that when it comes to security, we really need to always be thinking and applying a defense in depth mindset, which is why we need to layer in a meaningful way several security capabilities on top of each other to provide more security and to prevent the likelihood of potential cyber adversaries and bad actors finding success with their attacks. Which is why, in addition to this just-in-time VM access capability, when looking at to holistically secure your servers, whether it be on AWS, on GCP, or on Azure, we also provide native support from Microsoft Defender for Servers, which is our solution that can then holistically protect your servers even in your multi-cloud environments. Now, to show you how this looks like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to navigate into a live demo environment. So just to set the stage, what I've done here is I went ahead and I navigated to the Microsoft Defender for Cloud dashboard inside of the Azure portal. The user that I'm currently using to be logged in here, they have the security admin role, which is one of those roles that's really used extensively in Defender for Cloud when you want to go configure, enable plans, and configure different parts of the product. So just to set the stage, I'm going to be using a user with that role to show you some of the capabilities that you and I were talking about. Should you have any questions, feel free to use the chat window. We want to make sure that we leave at least 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A towards the end. And we have the wider team here to support with answering any questions you might have in the chat window. So please keep them coming. Now, what organizations can do is we also talked about the importance of having visibility across clouds, so both across Azure, AWS, as well as GCP. Defender for Cloud gives you the ability to connect your AWS as well as GCP environments to Defender for Cloud using this simplified onboarding experience, where by adding a connector, you can then onboard your AWS, GCP, and even your GitHub and Azure DevOps environment to Defender for Cloud. The CSPM is completely agentless. You're able to get real value out of using Defender for Cloud's multi-cloud capabilities in less than 24 hours. However, in addition to CSPM capabilities, if I select one connector to give you a sense of what are the different capabilities you can avail of for AWS, and I'm going to do the same for GCP. So in addition to providing you with security recommendations and secure score for AWS as well as GCP that are available at no additional cost. So I'll repeat that again. If you are onboarding your AWS and GCP environments to Defender for Cloud, you can avail of security recommendations as well as secure score for those clouds and all up for your organization at no additional cost. However, at the same time, we also heard feedback from organizations that some have requirements and many have requirements for more advanced CSPM capabilities, most of which come in the form of the Defender CSPM plan that you see here. So Defender CSPM is also completely agentless. It will not be deploying any agent or extensions on your workloads. However, at the same time, we know in addition to applying security best practice guidance and having strong security cyber hygiene, we know it's also important to monitor the environment for potential signs of compromise, which is why for the threat detection capabilities, those are agent-based, and we do have a native support for EC2, so for AWS servers, but also for managed Kubernetes in AWS, which as of today we support EKS, so Elastic Kubernetes Service, as well as for databases. Now, our support for GCP is very similar in a way that we also offer you, and let me navigate to the plans to show you this, we offer you with recommendations as well as secure score for your GCP workloads at no additional cost. The advanced and premium CSPM capabilities, those you can avail through the Defender CSPM plan. And then also similarly to AWS, the Defender CSPM is completely agentless. So we do not deploy any agent or extensions. Agent extensions are deployed when looking towards having a real-time threat detection capability and really like deep threat detection capabilities for your servers on GCP, your databases, as well as your containers. As of today, we support GKE, so Google Kubernetes Agent, as a managed container offering on GCP. Now, after you've gone ahead and then onboarded your AWS and or GCP environment to Defender for Cloud, you really do have this single dashboard for your multi-cloud security, where you can even take advantage of this singular security KPI across your different clouds, but also all up in the form of Secure Score. And Secure Score is quite important if you think about how do you track progress, as well as how do you get a sense of where you are currently in your environment from a CSPM perspective. And that can be really powerful to both get an understanding where you are currently, as well as what you need to do to improve. And we have it not just all up for your environment, but you also can have it here and have it here broken per specific cloud. Now, we in the Defender for Cloud space are also committed to helping you do more with less. We also heard some organizations and businesses have a lot of recommendations to remediate. And what we also acknowledge is not all recommendations carry with themselves the same risk. And we also want to help you prioritize based on risk. Risk for us is also a way of looking at two aspects. It's how something can be exploited, as well as what is the business impact of it. And this is something we recently announced at Ignite in the form of the Cloud Security Graph capability that Yura spoke about. So Cloud Security Graph is this core capability on top of which we also have features that I'm going to go deeper into. But at a very, very high level, it also allows you then to prioritize, do more with less based on risk that takes into account of exploitability as well as the overall business impact. So what can help here is when you select recommendations, you will be presented with the list of security best practice guidance that you can implement to improve your overall security posture. By improving your overall security posture, your secure score will increase, which would also then improve your overall cybersecurity hygiene, as well as decrease the likelihood for bad actors finding success with their attacks. But at the same time, helping you do more with less is where I'm going to go into the attack paths capability. One way of looking at attack paths is we also want to make sure that we capture our knowledge around what's important and what can be exploited. And attack paths at a very, very high level allow you to do that by providing you with both coverage across Azure as well as AWS. You can really here also leverage the knowledge which we have around the different scenarios which can represent real risk to your environment. If I select, for example, here, out of the ones that are highlighted for the environment that I'm using, I'm going to go with the Internet Exposed EC2 instances that both have high severity vulnerabilities as well as have read permissions to a key management service, which again, with regards to context, presents a risk. If I have something that's exposed, like EC2 instance, and that does have known high severity vulnerabilities on it, so that could obviously get exploited to then get permissions to the key management service itself. So after I've gone ahead and selected this attack path, there are a couple of different things I can see here. And as you can see, this blade carries with itself quite a bit of information. So let's kind of walk you through the main pieces. So here you can see the potential impact as well as what are the different resource types that are involved. And as you can see here with the native support that we have for AWS, you can also see AWS EC2 instances being affected as well as KMS, but also other resource types. If I go over to the right side, what I can also see here is different attack paths depending on the resource in question. When I select on a specific attack path, I can see this visual here, which has a lot of different, it's bringing together a lot of different data sources. So before us introducing the cloud security graph and attack paths, we also heard from a lot of organizations that they needed to leverage a lot of third-party solutions to actually help them understand what is the actual risk to their environment. So with the cloud security graph, we're able to bring all of this in one place for you. And when you select a particular attack path, which I'm going to select this one here, you can even then see the graph-based contextual risk assessment, which you can also interact with. So when you select the different here resource types as well as the different components of it, you can also get further insights as to what is the actual IP for which the EC2 instance is exposed. Then you can find more insights about the instance itself, as well as what are the different permission it has. Like for this specific example, we see that for this IP address, I could gain access, a potentially malicious bad actor could gain access to a EC2 internet gateway, then get access to an AWS EC2 instance. That EC2 instance, however, has permissions to an AWS account, which then contains the key management service as well as the specific key in question. And the reason why Yura and I are showing you this is also going back to doing more with less. So we want to also help you then understand what recommendations you need to remediate here to close off this attack path. So this is something you, just by selecting here the recommendations tab, you're able to see what are the applicable recommendations that Defender for Cloud has generated based on the continuous assessment capability to pick up on misconfigurations for your AWS EC2 instances. And as of today, we support AWS as well as Azure. Now, with that being said, we also understand that I do also want to acknowledge that we do not know your environment as good as you know it. So although attack paths that you can see here is the knowledge we capture around what organizations have shared with us that it's important, what we also have learned that can be exploited, we also know we will never know your environment as good as you know it, which is why you can also leverage the Cloud Security Explorer. And to show you, I'm going to go back to the Defender for Cloud dashboard, and I'm going to select here Cloud Security Explorer. The Cloud Security Explorer allows you to best understand what's most important to your environment. So it enables you to focus your attention on the actual, the most important risk to your organization. It allows you to tap into the Cloud Security Graph and query it. Now you can do this on the fly by building here a query, or you can also leverage the built-in templates that we have. So if I, for example, select here the template with regards to AWS resources, like EC2 instance with vulnerable open SSL version installed. Here, through the template, you can even see how it's already being pre-populated, and I can just go ahead and click search. Now, it's always possible to also amend this query. So this is not using KQL. You do not need to know or be proficient in KQL to use it. This is something like a low entry-level analyst can also, without even knowing KQL, get a lot of value of. It's just using drag and drops to assemble here a query that, again, we want to acknowledge that you know your environment best. So this allows you then to translate that custom understanding of your environment and to see and to understand what is most important, as well as what is the risk to the most important assets in your environment. Which is why if I even then go here, you can leverage the built-in queries even to modify it, where I can even go here and remove a couple of filters. And then I can use it to query the Cloud Security Graph, which will give us the results. When I select a particular one, which in this case is a EC2 instance, I can also here get the additional insights. Now, these additional insights, like what is the installed software, those are powered by the agentless VA scanning capability that Yura mentioned. So as of today, we support AWS as well as Azure. And what's also important to highlight here is, especially with regards to the context context in which we found ourselves nowadays, where we have a lot of vulnerabilities. And even the most recent one is the Open SSL v3 vulnerability. So one way you could also operationalize the Cloud Security Explorer is while you're still waiting for that patch, for that vulnerability, you can even beforehand go here to get an understanding of what are the actual resources, VMs that do have this known vulnerability, helping you to prioritize their remediation when a patch is released. But you can also use it after a zero-day has been detected to get an understanding of what is the resources that are exposed to it or vulnerable to it, as well as to see the different contexts between resources. So similar to what we did here in this query is you can then go and you can also see the different relationships between resources. So to show you how this looks like firsthand is I'll go back to the Cloud Security Explorer as such to showcase this on an example of a built-in template. And here I'm going to switch over to Azure resources. And by using this built-in template, which is Azure VMs that have a log4shell vulnerability and permissions to a storage account, you can also see how you're able to use the Cloud Security Graph, not just to show you vulnerabilities, but also to show you the relationship between different resources, where you can query what, for example, if a virtual machine is potentially vulnerable, what are other resources that you consider important to your organization that might be also at risk due to having a connection or to this virtual machine having permissions or access to them. So in this specific template, as you can see, it's a storage account. But again, I would highly encourage you to also give the Cloud Security Explorer as well as the Defender CSPM capabilities a try. While it's in public preview, it's available to be evaluated at no additional cost, and through it you obviously get the capability to do more with less by us providing you then with this risk assessment based on exploitability as well as the business impact, both in the knowledge that we have and captured through the built-in attack paths, but also providing you with the ability to customize and translate knowledge that you have of your environment into queries using the Cloud Security Explorer. Now, with that, once you've identified what is the specific vulnerability or what is the specific misconfiguration, we also want to help you and empower you to drive its remediation, which is why when you do select a specific here, if I have a resource to show this on, is I can also switch to the recommendations blade, where then through the attack paths, if I go back and take as an example one of the built-in attack paths, like the one that we already revisited that has Internet exposed EC2 instances with high severity vulnerabilities and read permissions to a key management service, then we also know that in addition to helping you discover this, it's also important to follow up on the remediation process and how that is done, which is why both for AWS, but as well as GCP and Azure, we do support a built-in capability which we touched upon called security governance. Now, security governance aims to help you decrease the mean time to remediation that it takes you, as well as helping you also work with the different workload owners to get them to remediate misconfigurations of their workloads. So it's a built-in framework that you can use. And if I select here one EC2 instance to give you an example, so here I can leverage and already see the built-in security governance capabilities, where in order to drive remediation and follow through of these actions, I have the ability to assign an owner. So I'm going to go ahead and assign it to my good friend Yura, who is going to be in charge for remediating the misconfiguration on this EC2 instance. We believe by having an owner, you're also able to drive accountability as to who is responsible for remediating the process. In addition to the owner, I also need to specify what is the time that the organization finds acceptable for this misconfiguration to be remediated. So in my case, because EC2 instances should not have a public IP address, I'm going to put somewhat of a shorter time frame. And here I can also apply a grace period. Now, grace period aims to help organizations who felt that with regards to some recommendations, they needed to play catch up with Defender for Cloud. So for example, when a new recommendation surfaces, that obviously got reflected in Secure Score, which is, again, that singular security KPI that you can use in Defender for Cloud. By applying a grace period, you're able then to tell Defender for Cloud that until this due date, you would prefer for the unhealthy state of this recommendation to not affect Secure Score. So this is something that's optional and can be applied as well. But with working with organizations, we also found that it's important for them to be able to have visibility, as well as provide visibility to their direct management or line managers as to what are the open and overdue tasks. And these are optional settings you can use to also send email notifications that will not only notify owners weekly of what are the open and overdue tasks, but also their management as well. And this is also leveraging Azure Active Directory. Now, once I've gone ahead and assigned this to Yura, I can also, by going back to the Defender for Cloud dashboard, I can also already see here a status, which helps me understand which recommendations are overdue. So I can even then, by going into specific recommendations, I can see who is the person responsible for remediating and driving that remediation process, what is the due date, as well as the status. And we obviously have ways to allow you to set these governance rules at scale. So we do not expect you to go and do them manually. We obviously are here and have capabilities to support you in doing this programmatically. Now, what I also wanted to do is just very, very briefly touch upon the just-in-time VM access capability. So this is something we also know it's important because obviously the management ports left open present an opportunity for cyber adversaries, and it's something we also need to take into consideration. But being mindful of time, I do want to make sure that we cover the regulatory compliance blade as well. So with that, I want to pass it over to Yura.
Thanks,
Yura,
Bojan.
over to you.
Thank you. Let me share my screen right now. So quickly, I do want to cover the regulatory compliance experience within Defender for Cloud. So as you can see here, I am in the Defender for Cloud overview. If I scroll down a little bit under cloud security here, there is regulatory compliance. Now here, I mentioned earlier that we do have separate standards for AWS and GCP, but let's focus on the changes we've made within Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark. If I go ahead and expand all of these compliance controls, you'll see here right in this view, there are automated assessments for Azure and AWS right now. And it's just those two right now, but you can see on the right, the resource compliance status here. So you can see really quickly and really, at a glance, where am I in terms of compliance status for specific standards? So it's divided by network security, identity management. If you scroll down, you'll see some other sections as well. What I also want to point out is if you click on control details, so this is a cool new blade where it kind of shows the responsibility divided between you as a customer and then Microsoft as the cloud provider in a shared environment setting, right? So under your actions, there are specific actions that I have to take that I am responsible for because at the end of the day, this is my data that I am protecting. And I can kind of scroll down and say, okay, there are specific recommendations based off of specific action names that I need to take. And within here, I can also quickly glance and see, okay, where am I in terms of resource compliance status? is there anything that I'm good at? Is there anything that I need that needs attention right away? So this actually applies to all of the compliance controls within MCSB. Again, MCSB is for Azure and AWS right now, but again, this is a great way to start protecting your multi-cloud environment this way. And that concludes my my part of the demo. Bojan, anything else we should move on to?
I believe you captured it perfectly, Yura. And I believe it's also a great opportunity to hear from our audience. So we are very excited to learn what questions you have for us. I see the chat has been very, very busy. So thank you to everyone who's also helped to reply and respond to comments and queries. And we want to hear more from you. So what questions do you have for us?
Yes, you are absolutely right. The Q&A team has done a wonderful job at answering questions. We will wait a second to see if any come in. We have one here. Could you please explain if Defender for Cloud is working with the AWS and ServiceNow version Super Cazola? And second question, how do you change the secure score and what is exploited in KMS?
Those are all great questions. So in order to be sure to answer all of them, so let's go step by step. And I'll just go back to the chat window. Apologies, working on one screen to actually find the question, so I am sure we address everything. And I'd like to start with what we offer as of today for AWS, and Yura, feel free to chime in. So our coverage of AWS as of today, we provide CSPM as well as CWP. On the CSPM side, we obviously are completely agentless and not dependent on Security Hub, which is AWS's security solution, obviously, and that's a very important thing to mention. So we are not dependent on Security Hub. Defender for Cloud through APIs is getting information about your AWS estate, as well as providing you then with recommendations without the dependency on Security Hub. What we also are able to do is once you do have those recommendations in Defender for Cloud and Defender for Cloud being able to provide you with that single dashboard for your cloud security across multi-cloud, so both across AWS and other clouds that you might be using, you can also leverage a couple of different things there to integrate with other systems that might be in use in your organization as of today. So ITCMs are something we're well aware that organizations are using, so you could potentially even integrate with Logic Apps with the ITCM that you're using as of today. If it supports, for example, REST API calls, which most of them do, you would be able to also then perform and create a workflow. We also have plenty of workflows, apologies, made available on our official GitHub community that you can also then customize depending on the system that you would like to integrate with. Now, for some ITCMs, we already have that. For others, you can leverage those that we have as a template and just modify them. And I'll make sure that we share the link to it also in the chat window. Yura, anything to add from your side or anything I might have missed?
Yeah, I also wanted to address the ServiceNow question. With Defender for Cloud and at least from the compliance perspective and the security recommendations perspective, we use we rely on industry and cloud service provider security best practices and standards and frameworks. So we're looking at, you know, the Center of Internet Security Controls, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, so CIS and NIST, and also PCI DSS. I don't know if that answers your question about ServiceNow, but you know, that's interesting, and I think maybe if you can type in and kind of clarify if it doesn't, you know, what else you're looking for. The second question is, how do you change the secure score and Tini, is that, and what is exploited in KMS? So Frank, I'd ask you to kind of clarify that within the chat if you can. Thank you.
And I see in the meantime, we have more questions coming in, so please keep them coming. We'll make sure to answer all of them, and we also have a wider team that's here to support. So again, a heartfelt thank you to all of them. We also have a question, how reliable is the score from AWS and GCP environments? And I believe that's also an interesting one, because one of the reasons why we have this agentless approach to CSPM and why we do not rely on AWS's Security Hub and GCP's Command Center, which is their equivalent to Security Hub, is we want to make sure that we provide you with equal coverage of the recommendations across clouds and multi-cloud. So by not being dependent on Security Hub and GCP's Command Center, and by Defender for Cloud providing and generating all of those recommendations, we believe we are able to provide you not just with an equal coverage, but at the same time, we're also able to reduce the total cost of ownership of having a solution in place that might require third parties such as security or non-Microsoft solutions such as Security Hub and Command Center. So that's a very important one to also explain on. Anything to add from your side, Yura, before we pick on a couple of other questions to answer?
No, Bojan, I think you captured that really well. Thank you.
Then we also have, what is the SIEM role in this process? And I love this one because we obviously are not living in a siloed world. We also want to acknowledge that you as an organization already have your processes in place. And we do not want you to change those. Don't get us wrong. We want to just help you make them more efficient, which is why even if I can offer an example of the security governance capability, so this is something for logic apps, you can even integrate with your ITCM, some of which someone already raised in the chat window. Now, the SIEM's role in this process is still the same by providing you with an end-to-end visibility across your entire estate and providing you also with capabilities to respond. So if I take, for example, the security alerts that we can generate for AWS and GCP resources through, for example, Microsoft Defender for Servers, for which we have a native support for AWS and GCP, the security alerts that we generate could be a potential indication of an attack. And those are the ones you can feed to your SIEM, where you can obviously investigate them even further and then enrich them with other data sources that you have connected and are ingesting into your SIEM. So great question. What other questions does the team have for us?
Tom and Fernanda and the rest of the team have been very good with answering the ones that have been coming in.
Amazing. So we have a couple more minutes. So please, if you have any questions, now is the perfect time to ask, and we will make sure that we answer them until the end. So Ashley, how much time do you believe we have before we need to wrap up?
We have 3 minutes before we need to wrap up. So yes, just keep your questions coming and we will answer them as they come in. Maybe are there any questions that you want to answer, maybe that have already been answered by the team that we could answer out loud for the audience?
It's tricky because I believe all questions that I'm seeing in the chat window are very relevant to the discussion we're having today. One that I see that Tom answered, is it possible to exclude the VMs from the recommendations? Because some of them are not required to scan. So as Tom pointed out, you could look to leverage resource exemptions to exempt resources from being assessed. And this is applicable to multi-cloud, so you can do this for AWS, for GCP, as well as for Azure resources. So that's one that kind of caught my eye.
Okay, we have a couple more questions coming in. The next one is, does Azure provide any support for CIS benchmark for AKS specifically? Currently, there is only support for Azure CIS benchmark, but not specifically for AKS.
Yeah, that's a good question. So right now we're only supporting the CIS benchmark, but we could have something in the roadmap, but to discuss the roadmap, you'd have to join the private community, and I will respond to that question with the link to the chat to the community.
To join that community, the link is aka.ms/prseccomm.
I also have one, I see, and thank you again for all of the questions. So just to very, very quickly pick on two more. Correct, the role that was used in the demo was that of a security admin. And it's the security admin with regards to Azure roles and not with regards to security administrator on the Azure AD role side. So just very important to keep that in mind. I also see a very interesting question around what is your opinion when it comes to using either Defender for Cloud or AWS Security Hub to determine the posture of an AWS environment? The thing I would like to offer here is you're able to get recommendations and secure score for your AWS and GCP resources at no additional cost. So this is something we see a lot of value in using Defender for Cloud. Obviously, the premium capabilities are allowing you to then also cover more and more use cases, make your organizations more and more secure. But even just that, having the recommendations across your multi-cloud environment in a single dashboard is something that a lot of organizations that Yura, myself, and the team work with find of great value. So with that, I believe we're on time. Thank you so much for joining us and can't wait for the next one.
Yes, thank you to Bojan and Yura for being our guests today and for an excellent presentation. And thank you to the rest of the team who helped answer questions. Once again, I would like to remind the listeners that the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements is to visit our landing page at aka.ms/securitycommunity. And while there, you'll find easy ways to navigate and find the resources and learning content relevant to our security products and their communities. A good start would be browsing our bite-sized product videos, ninja trainings, recordings of past webinars, GitHub communities, and more. We love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars. Please take a minute submitting your webinar feedback at aka.ms/security webinar feedback. Thank you and see you next time. Goodbye.